What did I teach you?
You are Duke of New York. You're a number one.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
What did I teach you?
You are Duke of New York. You're a number one.
I can't hear you.
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
Peace. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, long. So type it into the chat for me. Excellent. That's what's up. Hope everybody's well. Thank you. Peace. Yes, I do have some of the joints on Rumble. I got a Rumble page. It's analogous to the YouTube page, but I think for the best quality of them not messing with everything is definitely on the app. Everything seems to run fine on that. No problems and everything. But yeah, use what's available, inshallah. Thank you. Thanks to everybody that came out to the gathering of the Masters event. That was really great. The Masters, of course, were the actual people who showed up and participated and really showed a lot of love in supporting the overall event and keeping everybody in high spirits, which was really dope. There was a lot of like family reunion type vibes going on with it, which was really dope. And just being able to build with the people and keep everything how do you say in balance, in line, in tune with everything was really dope. As well as seeing, people from mad long ago that I hadn't seen in all these years, definitely want to give respect and support to everybody that traveled for so long. One brother, big up to him, flew in from Iraq, like, you know what I mean? So I thought that was really dope in terms of, seeing the people and being able to be as, directly in the movement with the people, you know what I mean? As directed as opposed to it always being, how it a lot of time has to be. which is via the digital YouTube interface. You know what I'm saying? However, it still was dope, and I'm glad that so many people had come out, to support and to participate. That's more what I took back from it more than anything else, is just being able to be around like-minded people who, again, who are participating within the so-called movement that you are a part of, and the various incarnations of how, people, we as people commune and build with each other, you know what I mean? It's definitely important. Big up to all the artists that was out there too. Met this brother, these were his pieces and stuff. He was really dope. Big up to KT, But like I said, the masters is really the people. It's not the other way, you know what I mean? It's the other way around. The other way around. So definitely want to give respect to that. The part was really dope. Which again brings us back to what we were kind of discussing last week in terms of how a lot of this this social rot, you know what I mean? The social rot of what we perceive to be information and stuff. Why all of that is eroded to such a degree, and why now they're talking, they having crazy talk. They're talking about breaking up Google. You know what I mean? Saying it's too big. It's like Standard Oil. Standard Oil back in the day, it's like, you niggas is taking too much of the chop. But it's like, yeah, but like all of y'all is down with that. Like, what are you talking about? So it's a lot of class warfare going down. And whenever there's class warfare, stuff like that, that's when it's the best time for you to make, moves into things like trusts and things like that, because it's a good time to be private as possible. And if you can't what you can't have in privacy, you can make up for in security, So there's that. But specifically, I wasn't able to go into a lot of stuff at the event because the time kind of got, and it's just, I guess I went over or was supposed to, however long it was. It definitely wouldn't have been long enough. So I think I was only up to the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about maybe the 7th slide. No, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20. About the 20th slide is when they had to shut it down. So I was going to go into a lot of the joints that I wasn't able to get into and show them in the actual, at the actual venue. Stuff I didn't have a chance to go into. Before I go do that, anybody got any questions about anything? Yeah, so in a nutshell, it was really great. Like I said, seeing all of the people, being able to answer as many questions as possible, striving to keep in tandem and keep intact what we've been saying about who the Moors are specifically, or who we are as Moors specifically, as opposed to that just being just lumped in as just another so-called identity that the blacks have. You know what I'm saying? That's a good question. I think what's his name? Brother Rich had that on his show. He might have excerpts from it, or was gonna have a replay of it or something coming from that vein. But so for more on that, you might want to check there. But if I see anything, or if I get a tape of me actually doing it, my section at least, I'll definitely show that. You know what I'm saying? But one of the things we could basically just skim through, or basically put another nail in the coffin on, is the whole perception of, uh, Moors and Morocco, and Morocco's not the United States, and Morocco's not this, and Morocco the kingdom, all of this back and forth stuff that they keep going through. And that's basically because of the both transcendent nature of the empire and the blatant breakdown of social and ideological point of views, and then how those broke down further in terms of the jurisdictional or municipal Darwinism that was instituted by what was left of the so-called Moorish empires, as they fractured amongst themselves and became more retracted in how they participated in communication with one another, which by this time had become severely adversarial. So let's say this in the corner, starting from the left to the right, you got America, you got Europa, right? You got so-called Africa, right? Everything from, say, Morocco up into the Pyrenees, that's Africa. So from what today is the Kingdom of Morocco, or the North African coast, going all the way up now into Spain as far as the Pyrenees. Let's say all of that was Africa. You know what I mean? Or part of Africa when we say Africa. So that's why that's there. And then you have Asia, which is then represented by the Tartarian, so-called Mongolian, ancient Scythian or Scythian peoples, which led to the establishment of the Khanates and the czars and all of that type of stuff that came later. So there was a severe breakdown between all of these different factions, or main factions of so-called Moorish culture or world culture. And each one of these had their own monarchies, their own kingdoms, their own dominions, their own storehouses, their own customs, their own languages. You see what I'm saying? And then the subgroups of languages within those branchial or tangential groupings. You know what I'm saying? And then they had, let's say, the European or the Caucasian versions of them, the ones that was now working for them in terms of being dogs of war, beasts of burden and shit like that, mercenaries and shit like that. But essentially, what you had was a breakdown of the universal participation, or ceremonial participation, of all of our collective regions, securing one universal whole. That we have universal figureheads like the Sultan or the Emir or or the Khan or the Czar or the Emperor, or you know what I'm saying, eventually then becoming the president, the prime minister. You understand? These are all coming out of this breakdown of this central core of our universal homogeny. You know what I mean? As a universal money making people who was kind of all rocking the same way. And then after the fall of humanity, or let's say the fall of man, let's say 1492, aka 492, we then get all of the 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 corporate versions of what was left of these empires or kingdoms that had been translated into hundreds, right? Which are basically like countrywide corporations, and then they themselves were broken down further into into uh, into, let's say, religious backed, financially backed, occultly backed organizations that were the inheritors of these kingdoms and stuff, that once they got translated into hundreds, i.e. corporations, were then more almost brought into the Romanesque society on the other side of that. And then on the other side of that, basically began to practice whatever Moorish stuff, what they was doing in secret, while at the same time, um, stopping the dress pattern and stuff of themselves as traditional Moors. And then there was a whole section of Moorish people that was against that altogether. So when they talk about the war between the ancients and the moderns, the war between the northern and the southern states, the war between the monarchy and the republics, you see, it's all the same war. It's all the same people fighting the same thing. But at the very top of them were represented by these Moorish families or dominions that had gone through all of these different almost costume changes, you know what I mean, into what we would consider modern society, and then the idea of using decoys to then run that society. You know what I mean? While you're also participating in the other side of it. You see what I'm saying? The side that's also saying that it's oppressed. So in essence, you're on both sides of the conflict. And that's how we got to look at the Moorish Empire, or the fracturing of us as Moorish peoples in the diaspora, period. We were always fractured from the initial wars and never really rehealed. It's just during the millennial reign we was able to consolidate ourselves as more of a unified power base, in which creating the two-tier system, the Barbary powers, which was the imperial or the empire worldwide situation, right? Expanding of the corpus delicti, right? And then the the Barbary states, which are the the centers of power by which these are facilitated around the world, whether it be from the capital of Philadelphia, whether it be at Mount Moriah, whether it be at um, Tenochtitlan in so-called Mexico, you know what I'm saying, um, to the Alhambra, both abroad in España over there, and then the one over here. You see what I'm saying? Wherever we was making these decisions to make certain shit happen, that's the outsway, and how things trickled back down or started to trickle into what we perceive as modernism. You see what I'm saying? But to do that, the images of these empires had to change. See what I'm saying? The phenotypical idea of an Asian had to become what we would today consider an Asian. But Indians are Asians. See what I'm saying? But when you say Asian, you immediately, what comes to mind is a so-called like Japanese or Chinese or somebody like that. Like, but in actuality, all of these so-called Asians and so-called Eurasians and stuff, all of them have Dravidian or so-called African direct correlations to them in terms of their genealogy. Like the Scythian culture, like I said, is the ancient culture going back even um, analogous to the Thracian culture, which was a Nephilitic culture of giants, basically, that were like Greeks. And the Thracians um, uh, eventually, they say, descended into the Scythians, which is a horse culture. You know what I mean? But another name for them is the Laplanders. You know, no Oriental Finns. All of these different names that they give to disguise melanated people. But because they not in places that so-called melanated people were supposed to be, according to the modern Darwinistic, opportunistic, complexionistic um, anthropology they do today, you see, they switch that up. But these essentially is the people when they talk about the Tartarians and these types of these ancient Russos and them types. All of these is Asiatics. All of these is Moors. You see, because they were the inheritors and the people running these empires and these kingdoms and stuff back when all of this was happening. You know what I mean? Not because they had invaded this place or came from this place. They had always been in that place. Just like this. Remember, all continents are together on the same earth, whether you think it's round, whether you think it's flat. All what you can agree on is that all of these continents are together. So when they talk about North Africa or the North African peoples or the original peoples of North Africa, the original North Africa was all of this. You understand? All of this right here, these mountain ranges from the Atlas over here to the Appalachian and tip of Rockies over actually Appalachians over here to the Caledonian Mountains over here. All of this is the same place. All of this is North Africa. So when you talk about the original peoples of North Africa being white, i.e. Moors, or America being in Morocco being in America, i.e. through the Moors, this is already established through articles like this, 250 million year old piece of Africa found in the southeastern portion. Larger portions may still be discovered, which is all of this what we're talking about. So if this is Morocco back then, this is Morocco back then too. You understand? Because it's the same chunk, southeast portion, which again is the portion that's supposed to be dealing with the barbarous nations. Why would you call Indians barbarous when it really meant barbarian? And the barbarians were the Berber librarians, or the Berbic librarians, you understand? Or Liberians, or Libyans, because Libya, uh, that was another name for uh, the portion of Africa with America in it. When they talk about Alkebulan, what's another one? Oh, I'm gonna write it down. Yeah, Ortygia, right? Corphe, Corphye, Libya, Alkebulan, right? Ethiopia, Aethiopia, like Ethiopia, like the eighth of what Randolph used to talk about, refer to as God. Um, so again, this ties us back to what we were saying. So we already in Africa by being in America, especially in the southeast portion of that. which would make sense why you could go allegedly to Africa through the Great Canyon, because it's one big circle all the way around. But they got to do everything the way they got to do, because they got rituals that they got to follow, and lies they got to make everybody still agree to. So scientists have known for some time that the presence of the strange band of magnetic rock that stretches from Alabama through Georgia offshore to the North Carolina coast, but its origin has been debated. The ribbon of rock is buried about 9 to 12 miles below the surface, according to the new study published in the Journal of Geological Society of America. The fissure, known as the Brunswick Magnetic Anomaly, was created hundreds of millions of years ago when the crusts of Africa and North America were yanked apart like stitches in a piece of cloth. So to mean they were yanked apart means that they were actually one. You understand? And now with the continental drift, they're basically at the closest they've ever been, which is why they have to make us believe we've been the farthest apart. Understand? It's always the opposite with these people. It's always the opposite of what they're saying. Maurice said, what's the difference between white people and white people? WHITE people is anybody that's not the people who are identifying as that now. So WHITE people are original people who were the original white people based on the original caste, or people who have claimed that aspect of themselves through the present caste system in a manner that they're receiving some sort of benefit from the exchange, either from either extreme they're operating from. WIGHT people are the people who have been benefiting from the idea of white supremacy and how that's been instituted, and are the descendants of the original people of the original so-called slave trade, translated slave trade, when they brought the people from the Trans Europe Express and put them on boats and brought them over to the United States, and then gave them nationalities through Ellis Island, and then gave them land and everything to foster those identities. So one is of the caste, one is of the so-called color. You know what I mean? So to also know that we're talking about the Americas when we're talking about the ancient land masses. In the name of the country, from the book Babylonian Magic. From the origin term, which while in the name of the country means light to the Semite living in the east, Babylonia, it also meant evening darkness or west, because the Amaru or Uru was the land of the west or of the sunset, i.e. the land of the going in of the sun. See what I'm saying? Whereas the Prophet Noble Jarlis said, on the earth there are only two races, the Asiatic and the European. Now when he says European, he's really talking about West Asian, right? And we're talking about races, we're talking about the societal construct of what people and who identifies as a part of a specific race, right? So that means we're talking about the social construct. Yes, we are the original so-called whites, or Alawites, which was a dynasty out of ancient Morocco that people claim descent from today. The white turbans and the white fezzes and the white horses and the white flags and all that shit he was wearing. We're the ones that were the most identified with that. Like the Moors are the ones who, from ancient times to modern times, maintained their own form of dress, and which was the closest in terms of apparel or appearance to the super ancient, let's say Mauritanians, you know what I mean, to the so-called modern so-called Arabians. You know what I mean? We had a distinct way of dressing. So back then, Earth was split up into three sections. See? Yeah, all of this was Asia. So the top part of the United States was Asia, i.e. Tartary. You see what I'm saying? And Russia and all of that shit was connected all the way down to South America. And then it was split on the opposite now, where you had Africa and so-called South America and then Australia and all that stuff under that. So it was a three-quadrant system. You just couldn't go to this part. So technically, this was part of Europe to them. You understand? Like if you lived in Asia at this point, you would be looking at the United States like a part of Europe. Because the United States is a part of Europe, right? Even to this day, it's part of the European Union, right? Or was. So that's why it was diabolical to use the white skin to identify with the white caste system and then use the terrorist organizations like the KKK and the JDL and the NAACP and shit to enforce this racetocracy, you see, by using that generation, that 85-year generation of the 85s between the end of the Civil War and 1871, them peoples within that time period, to re-educate them and to fracture them and then to switch the timelines on them, you see. So when it was 836 BC to us, it was 1196 to them. So by the time it was 1416 to them, to us, it was 1776 for them. You see what I'm saying? Therefore, according to that, chattel slavery officially then began in 1779 and ended in 1865, which means it lasted for 85 years. So everything after that 85 years was them putting on, you see what I'm saying, or allowing some shit to go down that had already been squashed. You understand? And then that 85 representing the dumb, deaf, and blind, who are either falling under the jurisdiction of the Asiatics or the Europeans. That's why when you read books how the Italians became white, what every Italian should know, how the Irish became white. These were all things that they acquired by breeding out the darker aspects of their nationalities and forcing them into the ghettos and shit. That was a thing that they actually did. Like Italians, these people was not considered white until after the year 2000. Like when they started letting Africans come over here and letting Africans be white. Because it's a caste system with that. And you're identifying with an original person's designation that you know you shouldn't have. Oh, so yeah, Armorica, right? This is real big in books like the Geneva Bible and Legends of King Arthur and his brother Prince Murray. This is all the same thing. So when they talk about Armorica or talk about Brittany Gallo or Galloway in Britannia, they're talking about United States. Because whenever they use the word Celtic, you can look this up. Celtic has been identified now with the word so-called black or Negro, which means Moorish in their twisted version. Black doesn't mean Moorish, you understand? But blacks are identified with Moors. But what makes them Moors or blacks is based upon their declarant nationality and how they define themselves. Okay? So yeah, so when they talk about before the sea or beyond the sea, they talk about the Atlantic. You understand? Africa as a continent is incredibly huge. You understand? It's incredibly huge. How it looks in the Mercator map was done on purpose to make us think that South America and America, they basically can fit inside of Africa. You understand? This is how huge Africa and all of that is. And as one of the greatest resources in the world for everything natural, it's awesome. It's just that it became the breadbasket of the world is because we were the ones that helped procure and turn it into that. You understand? Which is why, again, they stopped calling it Alkebulan. It started going by the names we called it amongst each other. See what I'm saying? Africanus, Afrius. These was all Latin words that we now, who are more from over here, are using on our expeditions over there. And so the independent identity that we all have as so-called Moorish Americans or ancient Mauritanians, i.e. the Moorish peoples, are then codified and unified within the areas by which we are derived from. So some of us from back in the days used to go up north, who lived down south used to go up north for the summer. And then there was a lot of us that used to, from up north, they used to go down south for the summer. That is all to mirror the ancient expeditions or trade routes of the natural tribe of Ben Ishmael did annually, regardless to white people being on the planet or not. That's just something that we naturally have done. If you get the book, The Tribe of Ben Ishmael, it talks about this annual migration that they had been doing from the times of the so-called Mayas. So this is before white man had jobs. This is before the white man had railroad and all this other type of shit that we invented that they just took over. So they know where the original Marrakesh was and all of this was going down and why we signed the Declaration of Independence on the banks of Lake Erie, why one of the last naval battles fought by these Moorish kings that ruled America and all of that was fought on the, the banks of Erie, because this is where Fez was and all of that before. It was directed to being over there. Now, if we hadn't been given our history as a people who were anciently from this land, but due to the wars of our forefathers, fell out of jurisdiction and control of this land, the same way other people are told about how it was when we was ruling them, then we would have a greater appreciation not only for ourselves but for our own people. Like if you look at the Samoans, if you look at the Samoan community, the so-called Cholo or Chicano community or these other communities, they are all basing their male or masculine identities on these so-called warrior cultures. So even though they are descended from the conquistadors, the same people who came to rape our grandmothers and all the shit they talk about, they are still identifying with something that is specifically masculine or manly, and is identifying with them fighting to stay here. You see what I'm saying? Where we are constantly taught that where we're born at is not where we're really from. So you have people from England talking about how it's sad that Black Americans don't know where they come from. But the people saying this is niggas that's born in England, which means what? They're from Jamaica or Africa. You know what I'm saying? But if they're born second, third, fourth, fifth generation in Britain, you understand? Even though their ancestors in them came from Nigeria or wherever, they are more British than they are anything else because they don't have no connection to all that other stuff y'all niggas talking about. You know what I'm saying? But most of the Jamaican, just because you a Jamaican, don't mean that you cool with the night of Bingy. Like, you're not at the Bingy just because you Jamaican. You know what I'm saying? Most Jamaicans is raised damn near Catholic. You know what I'm saying? They damn near Christian. Like, which again, there's nothing wrong with if that's what you want to do. You understand? At this point, Christianity is just as good as Islam, which is just as good as Hinduism and all the other shit they doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, at that point, if it's working for you, then let it work for you. Don't get caught up in what I'm saying I am, because I'm talking to other people who are understanding who they are and are finding correlation in this finding that I'm finding out, or helping to just express or display to them that they are identifying with. But that don't mean just because you identifying with that you ancestrally were that. You see what I'm saying? This is where you get it twisted. That's why you can't get so caught up in that. Like what I was saying at the lecture was like, this is a picture of the same landmass being identified under two different names. You know what I'm saying? But all written in English. So when they talk about the Olmecs and the Mayas, they talk about the G, right? And the Amaru. Because Maya is the river. You understand? Maya is also an ancient goddess of illusion. But then when you read about this same landmass in these battles in the Book of Mormon, you read about the neophyte capture of the city of Mulek, right? They talk about Lehi and Tenakum going to battle with Moroni or Moronian, you understand? Tribes. These are now ancient Mauritanian races going to war with each other, trying to enter into what they're going to be. And out of being that, they become Moorish peoples, you see? That's why we can claim descended from this. That's because we're the only people who are always identified in all of this old stuff. Because the Canaanites were a ill, ancient, demagogic people who were incredible builders and had elements of the old Nephilimic gene and all that shit in them, but they could be very, very crass and destructive to one another. You understand? So because Tartary was in America, which back in these days it was called Cathay, this is also why Russia was in America, see, and eventually was absorbed into the Hawaiian so-called national structure, and then was repopulated by a bunch of conversos who went corporate. See, Oranius is even a Moor. Is a Moorish Caesar. See if I can find a picture of him. Honorius thinks that the expeditions of those Scythians into America, see, might happen about AC 400 when the affairs of the North were in the utmost confusion by their mutual wars. See, all of these Moors, all of these ancient factions of Moors from all these different areas from the four corners is basically all at each other's throats right now. Because some of these new Moors is trying to use these other races as cyborgs almost to displace them and take control of the whole thing. They wasn't with that. Which together they're being overflocked with people, occasionally rambling to all the quarters, and then it's probable that those who lay nearest America were forced to take sanctuary in that country. This is Marco Polo talking. This seems to be confirmed from the accounting which the Americans give at Chickamichi, right? who were what? A barbarous people. So that means what? They were a Moorish people. Why was they calling Indian? Why was they calling all of the so-called Indians barbarous back then? But you don't call Indians barbarous now. How come it was more when they was darker? Who much resemble, look, barbarous people who much resemble the old Scythians in their hunting, rambling, and other customs, and according to them came into Mexico about the 700th year of Christ. So around the 700th year of the millennial reign, we was already here, reestablishing our dominion and shit already here. And that they had people most of the northerly parts of America. Before that time, before then, we was already here doing it. In the straits which bear his name, found a people in complexion, habit, and customs that resembled the Saracens or the Tartaries. So they came here because they looked exactly like the people that was already here. That's why you could find a skull from the princess Raya Nasqua, who's of a Scythian skull in Poland, but the skull appears to be that of a black woman. Look at this. Look at this more. Who's teaching them how to? Where was they getting gold? All of this gold from? Burying each other like G's, like. So that's why you can be Asiatic. You understand? Because you got all of that within you, because you was born here. So all of the radiation, all of the mosquito bites, all of the energy that it took to raise you from an infant to now was given to you by the land that you on. Now, this is not to say that you can't make that work no other way else, but it's something when everybody in the world is coming to your place. It's not like everybody in the world is moving to Guam, or everybody in the world is moving to Yemen or Dubai even. You got to have money for all of that. But everybody in the world is trying to come here. And then at the same time, they're saying how they're trying to destroy it. So think about that. Even as they saying how it's nothing, and y'all, we're gonna blow it up and turn it into a prison or some shit. Niggas is still like, nah. I'm a come and see how it go for me. Like, you understand? What do you do? What do you? You can't stop that. You can't one day now decide you're going to now make this a communist now. Like what? You know how many industries you're gonna upset? That's why they're trying to do it slowly and low key openly with the DEI shit, but that shit is not working. They are getting killed in the lawsuit departments. They're getting killed. This is how deep it is. It's so scandalous now. Disney the other day, a man, and I'll get to what's on the screen in a minute. A man was at a Disney park with his family, and somehow or another he got the wrong drink from the Disney staff or whoever they was from, and he wound up going into some sort of electric seizure or shot or some shit, and it just got too much, and he wound up dying. So his family is taking Disney to court for, wrongful death and all of this. And now Disney is saying, well, you can't take us to court and do that because when you signed up for Disney Plus, you signed up and said that if there was any issue with any of the Disney services, that you would that you would agree to go through arbitration with Disney first. You understand? You understand what they're saying? So they could basically apply that to anything. Imagine if every corporation started doing that. So they're clearly not human. These corporations are not ran by human beings and shit. They're ran by the entities that we all believe is really running these things. That's why we believe that they're running, because it is like that. You see, once everything that you know to be true about the subject or the people in general has now been proven to be pure, unadulterated fact, they have no power anymore. You understand? It's more important that you guess if they eating children and doing that than whether or not they really doing it. They would rather you more invest in the idea of them actually doing it and believing that they're that bad than to really accept the fact that, well, maybe they're just acting most of the shit out because they're really cowardly. They're too cowardly to do it themselves. So when they talk about the Moors or the Moharam, right, which is Morty or Maori or Maori or Maor, right, or Amor, right, these are all descended from the Phoenician alphabet. So everything comes from the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were Carthaginians. And the Carthaginians were Moors. The Carthaginians were ancient Canaanites, per se, or ancient Mauritanians. So Canaanite, Phoenician, Fomorians, Moors, right, so forth and so on. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at it, they'll say proto-Sinaitic, which is basically the written language that they're saying they found at Sinai. That was obtained or translated to the modern world through the Phoenicians that came out with the original phonetics and the original numbers and alphabets and everything that everybody around the world read and understand is true. Okay. Then out of that, as they're Phoenician, they're Canaanite at this time. Then they go from being Canaanite to Hebrew. So 12 tribes of them break off and they decide to do their own thing. And out of the Hebrew, they take the Phoenician. So when they talk about the Hebrew alphabet, they're really talking about the Phoenician alphabet. But they don't want to talk about the Phoenicians because they don't want you thinking about the Canaanites, because you'll be thinking about L and all of that, and they don't want you to do that. You understand? So from the old Hebrew, now they start the modern text now, in which we're going into the next phase, right? So from the Proto-Sinaitic to the Phoenician, let's say to the old Phoenician, let's say that's old Hebrew. That's, let's say, the Typhonian period. Then from, let's say, the Aramaic, the Greek to the Latin, that's now the Obsidian period. Then from the English, Old English with the Y to the New English with the E, and then the Spanish and the this and the that, that's now Draconian. You understand? So us as the descendants of Phoenician people, Phoenician alphabet is always coming up with new ways and different ways of expressing ourselves with whatever alphabet that we're living in, which is a trait of that. Yeah, Paleo Hebrew is basically new phonetic, new Phoenician, a new phonetic, right? So Old Hebrew is really new Phoenician. You know what I'm saying? Which is Old Canaanitic. But the problem with the Canaanites, like I said, is because half of the reason why they was on was because they was also infused with the Nephilitic DNA, which then made them super intelligent, but then also like caught up in the underworld shit. Right? So the people of the West, that's what Moor Phoenician, the term Morum, right, is a Phoenician word, or Morum, or Mohudum, or Murhardum, right, which is Phoenician, can also be Hebrew. But the word Moor in Phoenician is Marum, which would be MHR, right? Which means those from the west. And we just read that west in the Amaru means the place of the going in by the sun. The word for pyramid is Mer or Moor, just like the Phoenician titles such as Muru, Mer, or Marutu can be translated to the meaning of the Western Sea, just like the Akkadian Amuru, like we just read. See, Marta meaning the farthest people, those of the farthest west. That's us over here in the Maghreb al-Aqsa. It also means strong or one of light. If they're using the Greek or the Roman term for you, then that means they speak it to you late in the game. They speak it to you from the Draconian period, because you could tie the Roman language to English in that way. Which means they're dating themselves, because you just reincarnated and adapted to whatever the society was that you was living in at the moment, at the time. See, the Phoenicians spoke a Hamitic Semitic language so closely allied to the Hebrew that Phoenician and Hebrew, though different dialects, may practically be regarded as the same language. Islam? So that's it. So if the Hebrew was a Hamitic Semitic language, and Semitic is an Afro-Asiatic dialect and language associated with a people, then that means the Moors are all of that. And that these ancient Canaanites that we're talking about, who were both good and evil, descended from this. Because these are the people spoken to us in our Circle 7 Quran that asked permission from the Pharaoh after the Hebrews were given the land of Canaan to inhabit. When Abraham came from the region of Babylon into the land of Canaan, he found that the Canaanite language similar to his own, which means that both of these cultures identified basically from the same root and parent culture that existed prior to them coming there, which again was an ancient Canaanitic culture. But some of the Canaanites were savages. Some of these niggas believed in the ancient angel worship where they would, sacrifice children and shit, which then led to the breaking up of the society. And so they started to refer to themselves as other things, but would still refer to themselves as what they were prior to them leaving. Abraham communicated very well with the inhabitants of the new land, adopted Canaanite language, made certain modifications, and it became known as Hebrew. See? Phonetic or Canaanic can be classified as an African language because the Canaanites were blood brothers to the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Nubians, Sudanese, and other so-called Africans. The Phoenicians established a colony where? In North Africa called Carthage, and they were called Carthaginians, also considered themselves to be Canaanites. Yes, and when we read the book, The Algonquin Conquest of the Mediterranean Region by Samuel Polk, he identifies that the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians both identify with being Canaanites, and that these Canaanites also identify as whites. Once you take the color out of it and you go for the status, you see exactly what it is. They possessed ships and uniform representations as they came in the name of the Fomorian, indicated from Africa. But in that day, Africa did not mean the continent of Africa as we now understand it. Major Wilford, in the 8th volume of the Asiatic Researches, has pointed out that Africa comes from afar, aparara, aparica, which term universally to signify what? The West. Just like we read in the other joint, where it said that Moor or Martyr meant people from the West. Just as we know those who speak in the Asiatic world as the East, when therefore the Fomorians claim to come from Africa, they simply meant they came from the West. See? Because Africa in America or North Africa was America, aka Tartary, aka Cathay, aka Turtle Island, aka, see? In the West, other words from Atlantis, see? There was no other country except America that was west of them. They possessed Ireland from so early a period that by some of the historians they are spoken of as the Aborigines of that country. See? So the Fomorians, the Parthenians, the Iberians, these are all melanated Phoenician type Moors. The Fomorians were a civilized race. They had a fleet of 60 ships and a strong army. The next invaders of their dominions was the Neemhind. He captured one of their fortifications, but it was retaken by the Fomorians under Moor, and Nebid was driven out of the land. Yeah, so these Atlanteans, Egyptians, Fomorians are all neighbors or brothers of the Carthaginians and Egyptians. These are all the same ancient peoples who were broken up based upon whatever deities and ideologies that they had been dealing with up until the fall. This African confederacy, they did not know themselves as Africans, would form a kingdom next to ancient Ghana to accept Islam and then go into Spain and reference themselves as the Moabites, which in Arabic is rendered the Almoravids. Right? So when you think about the Almoravid dynasty, that's a Moabite dynasty, because that's what their descendant came from. And the Moabites were one of the ancient clans that existed in the lands of Canaan. This proves that these Moors understood their bloodline lineage spanning millenniums, that this self-identity can be found even in their earlier, as per the Wars of Justinian by Procopius. In the war correspondence to the Roman generals, the Moors specifically identified themselves as Moors. See, the Romans said that these Moors identified themselves as Moors. So it wasn't what the Romans called themselves, because they would not allow themselves to be called anything else by anybody else. Which answers the claims of those who say that the name was given to them by the white man. This was never a name that the people called themselves. It would be highly unlikely that they would have accepted a name from the Romans and then identified themselves by that name. The Romans have called them by what they self-identify with in the same way the Moors would have called them Romans. Exactly. Cherokee language structure concerning that the Cherokee-Berber connection. Here's an excerpt, perhaps something for you to think about if you're Cherokee mixed blood considering DNA testing. Old Cherokee migration legends suggest that the ancient connection with the Berbers of North Africa, Morocco. See, because we was here when the landmass was here before it sunk. See, and then it says in medieval menial servants of the Britannic Majesty's subjects, though natives of the country, either Moors or Jews, be exempt from taxes of all kinds. Because we wasn't having it. Look what this says. Mr. Holston reports is so apocryphal as this, but he is more a compiler with little discrimination as to what he pillages. He indulges in the latest fads of Oriental spelling. The Quran becomes Quran with a Q, and he that we knew as Muhammad and have come to speak of as Mohammed here figures as Muhammad, while our old Muslim becomes Muslim, but he does not tell us how to sound these new vowels he sticks in, though we must suppose that he gives them to the ordinary English sound for that part of Arabia we know as Yemen, he spells as Yaman. See? So that's them in real time, and people quoting in real time how they trying to switch up the language and turn the shit into something that we don't know what it is. You gotta remember they split it all in half and then tried to get it where they could turn us against each other and we wouldn't speak to one another how we were supposed to, because we wouldn't abandon our principles and morals to go along with how they was living. So Moors who were seen as Muslims who weren't going along with the overtaking now of their culture and their identity as one such, they have to identify now through a Roman lens, i.e. Italian, Spanish in the common sense. They took all of their true identity and all of their stuff with them into that, where they wasn't just accepting it like that, where we still got to have the system in which the Grand Senor receives his tribute from all of these other people, and then that trickles down into the Omerta shit that becomes the mafia structure, which then becomes the structure that's followed by all of the underworld syndicates from that point on. Because these were all based on the ancient pirate structure that was established after the universal fall of everybody and everybody going for self. Tangier, September 4th. The Moors have frequently been called the Puritans of Islam. You hear that? The Moors have frequently been called the Puritans of Islam, whereas most educated Turks and many Persians, Egyptians, and Indian Mohammedans. So these are all Moors they speaking of now. They're speaking of Turkish Moors, Persian Moors, Egyptian Moors, and Indian Moors under the term Mohammedans, right? But even in that, we're distinct now. The Moors have frequently been called Puritans of Islam, whereas most educated Turks and many Persians, Egyptians, and Indian Mohammedans have adopted the European style of dress. Not a single Moor living within the borders of his own country has laid aside the cloak-like Arabian jaliba or jalabila. That's the joint I had on at the beginning. I was showing you from the event. Jalabila in the streets of Tangier, in the city most infested with Christians. So in Tangier, right, both over there and over here, we so heavy with it that we not giving up how we dress. Get the book Islam and the West, the Moriscos by Anwar G. Chejni. And in it, it has a whole section on the third prophecy of Muhammad. I just skip to the last verse where it says, the first cloud of the birds will be followed by other birds of the earth to announce the coming of the king of the east and the west, who will take Andalusia. The conflict between Islam and Christianity will end with the return to the law of the Moors. There will be much cloud in that year, scarcity of water, trees bearing extra fruits, and other signs. Conflict between Islam and Christianity will end with the return to the law of the Moors. The king of the east and west will come and take Andalusia. These are all prophecies that deal with us specifically as Moors. You understand? That the Celts and the Britons and the Pictish, the Romanese, the so-called Gypsies, all of these are European Moors. We had whole cities, flourishing cities, skyscrapers, all of that. Look, on your left side is St. Louis. On your right side is one of the ancient skyscraper cities that we already had, complete with walls and mountains behind us. In Bologna. See what I'm saying? We already been having all of these things. We've already been living in these things. All of these cities was already here. This shit was already here. These niggas didn't build nothing. They just rebuilt and refurbished shit that was already here. The Confederacy been a factor in the Americas from, again, the time of the Phoenician mercantile empire that became the republican form of government ruled by Carthage, which led to the appointment of the great Barca of the Lion family, Hannibal, to his premier position as chief orchestrator who had under him vassals, one of them being King Philip, who was the father of Alexander. You see, which now, if you look at it from that perspective, most of those battle instructions and stuff was coming from him. You understand? America was spelled vicariously in the first maps as documents as Amarica, as Amaraka, Americo, Amarocoa, Amarocoaca, Maraca, Morocco, Moraca, as well as America, as well as Amaracapana, right? Because all of these are reflections of the same thing. But remember, I told you the Mercator map, the way that they set it up to make all of these other countries seem more important or grandiose was all to also disunify the mercantile thing we already had established between us and the empires over there. That never reestablished themselves after the war. But of these old abandoned cities of Tartary, not a tradition remains. They are tombs without an epitaph. See, amid solace and silence. These are all of these old pictures you see of these cities that just look abandoned and don't have nobody in them. Something happened that wiped out all the people that was there so these new people can walk in. Oh, what sadness does such a spectacle fill the soul, the ruins of Greece, the superb remains of Egypt. All these, it is true, till death, all belong to the past, yet when you gaze upon them, you know what they are. You can retrace in memory the revolutions which have occasioned the ruins and decay of the country around them. Descend into the tomb wherein was buried alive the city of Heracleion, right? This was also the reason why that city was buried alive like that was because they were the ones dealing with the Hereshef stuff. You find there, it is true, a gigantic skeleton, but you have within you the historical associations wherein to galvanize it. But these old abandoned cities of Tartary, not a mention remains. See, Mr. Hugh mentions that he found a Mongol shepherd among the ruins who knew no more of the place than it has been called the Old Town. In a country inhabited by wandering pastoral tribes, such a state of inferior satisfied their ignorance respecting the ancient monuments and buildings that may exist. You see, where did those people go? We got deported. We got reinstituted in different places. So those places went into disrepair and then wound up falling into the hands of goat herders and these types of niggas. And then they built whole cities and societies on that. We just read that. Wherefore it is impossible to write anything in the Tartarian language, but the old same room, who are any way of you with the view of writing, may overlook you, and especially in the characters are large. Notwithstanding, there is not a Tartar, but prefers his native language to all others, and who thinks that the most beautiful copious in the world is the general foilable of mankind. Every one has a good opinion of himself, his country, and language, and in the perfutation of no other nation of the same advantages. Remarks of the Tartarian language had no title trouble to weed this prejudice out of the mind of the emperor's eldest son. So they got rid of all of that. But they didn't move us nowhere to do it. They just ran us out of one place and moved another people in. These would be the three different depictions of Moors in the old world and the modern. But these are all the same Moor. They just would have different designations based upon how other people would classify them. But the contingency within that is that they were all free Moors. But anybody free in the last epoch would be listed as a slave now. See, any god in the old epoch would be seen as a devil now. You see what I'm saying? But the Mongol invasion, the Tartarian invasion of America and all of that happened. But the books on all of that happening were kept from us so that way we wouldn't invest on us, this being the land that our forefathers actually built and fought for. You understand? The biggest thing is to keep us disconnected from the land of our birth so we don't give a damn about it to fight for it. But I'm showing you that we're already in Africa, we're already in Egypt, we're already in all of these places that they named after us, and that we are the purest in it. We are the purest in it. Islam. In the book Nature Knows No Color Line, they refer to the first Moor that brought the bathhouses to Europe was this dude right here named Sakoye Muhammad or Sake Muhammad. This is actually King George. This is him in the turban. He was seen by the Moorish Empire as the Sultan of Rome. As you see, these are Moors here. This is from the Oxford Dictionary. And it asks about the Moors. It says, in the Isle of Man, who summon the courts for the several sheddings, are the Lord Bailiffs called by that name, i.e. Moors. And every Moor has the like office with our bailiff of the hundreds. You see, because it was through the hundreds that the countries became corporations. And they had to do that transfer of ownership through the Moorish Empire and put everything under old Moorish law. And put everybody else under this new beyond the sea law shit. And as you can see, these are melanated king and queen right here. And behind them are the Moorish princes from the other nations that are supposedly they raising up as wards. See? The founders of the Holy Roman Empire, both Otto and Edith, Otto the First and Edith, all of these are old Moors of the old Republic of, the old black nobility aristocracy. So yeah, that's King George. Exactly. So just so you see that it's not just me. See, that's Granada. Again, it's Granada. Again. See, New Granada in California, Nova Granada, New Granada, right? All of this is in what they call ancient Mauritania. What does it say? From the Nueces between the Bravo, Nueces and the Bravos rivers, the natural boundary between the Anglo-Saxon and the Mauritanian races, who are the ancient Canaanite races. Amorites, Hittites, Moabites, Jebusites, all of these ancient builders. There ends the valley of the west, see, which is what Moor means, those from the west, right? Amaru. The Mexico begins, thence beyond the Bravo, the Moorish peoples and their Indian associates. Mauritania, right, has several waters in the coastal region flowing from the southwest. See? 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 Southwest. Mauritania. Inhabitants, mostly Moorish Muslims. The majority of people that live there is mostly Moorish Muslims. So if they would give us the true history of stuff as it actually was and let us know that no, our forefathers were the ones that ran all of this stuff, y'all just the ones that took it over after they were deposed and didn't go along with this giant charade when we say that Grenada's already in America, all of the stuff we be building on, it wouldn't be such a problem. Because everybody would know that, but nobody could know that because they go along with the secret of keeping it so that way nobody knows anything from whence we came. We got to go by the story of us being somebody's slave to be brought here. But if Estevanico was the slave, how was he, and he was from Africa, how was he able to bring y'all to all of these different places in America that y'all or him allegedly had never been to? How is it that he knew all of the languages to speak to all of these different races of people, to get y'all food and women and clothes and fire and shit? How did he know how to do that if he wasn't from here? How did he wind up, little Stephen, how did he wind up becoming Black Eagle and allegedly becoming the king of the so-called Indians? And you ain't never heard Indians use the word king or queen or anything like that. How was a black man, how was a French black man able to establish the whole city of Chicago, the Subal or the Sabel? How was he supposed to, how did he do that when all black people were supposed to be slaves at the time? That especially the French. How does any of that make sense? How is it that there's all of these maps with Grenada here in America? But if I say the Moors is from America, then y'all want to say that's not true. Like, look, it even get even more. We got the Alhambra. Look, the Alharas. This is the Alhambra right here. That's Grenada. That's the river, right? Then look, there's more castles over here. Uganda over here. All of this is Grenada. Look, they got the clocks, the cities. This is all here in America, though, which is Mauritania, which is also Mesopotamia, which is in Bolivia. Excuse me, Belize. That's where Shine is from. So then there's the term Indian, which again is Indus from the Harappan people, of course, but it gets deeper than that. But like we said, Moslem or Muslim or Moslem, sometimes they spell this with two L's. That's what we are as those being born in America with our understanding of Islam. We are seen as the Puritans because we don't have a lot of the death cult ritual shit they be doing. All of that stuff that's imported is either into it is now coming from one of their sources or some occult source like a Freemason now trying to inject the Moors or the Moorish movement with something along the lines of ritual that they can still aid European Moors, i.e. West Asians, with their little agendas, keeping us in the back. But all of these places, all of these Muslim schools that are found, like I said, all through the Midwest, Allen Springs, Logo, Mariso, the Keyhole Canyon, Hickelson, Summit Pass, the Washoe, Mas Verde, the Mimbres, the Big Tipper Canoe. All of these places date back and all have like Kufic script, so you know that's the real. Going back to the Kufic writing and all that. See, so the Empire of Morocco at its boundaries in 642 was basically everything that we see as Europe in that map I showed you with the three sectors of the world. The country of Morocco, you see what I'm saying? That now becomes the kingdom that's established in 1956. And those protectorates of it, or who still receive protection bracket money from it. Texas and all of that, the Alamo, that was all the Almoravid, the Moabite Moorish dynasties that was running shit. Another term for Indian is Indus, like I said, or Indios, right? That's one. Another one is indigo, right? Another one is indole. Indole chemistry began to develop the study of the dye of indigo. See, indigo can be converted into isotin and then to oxindole. Then in 1866, Adolf von Baer, like the Bayer aspirin, reduced oxindole and indole using zinc dust. In 1869, he printed the formula for indole. Now, all of this is a byproduct of murex, which was what they call the Carthaginian dye that was used in the ancient world to bring out all of the royal purples and maroons and all of these colors that really didn't exist. That was brought out by the milk and the crabs. Which is what they still doing to this day. We look up the blue blood of crabs and all of that. This is what they're doing. Anybody have any questions? It really is gonna be a thing about establishing like what what the nationality is how everything is running through your trusts, having a good so-called religious base, you know what I mean? Which is what we have, the Divine and National Movement, things like that. And then using that as a means of establishing private contracts and private business between one another to start to create a closed loop of communal fortification in the form of economic support of one another's businesses and services amongst each other to then generate that money amongst each other. And then use that again to open up and take advantage of the same thing these people are giving them advantages from. Understand? This is an excerpt from the school where they was teaching Moor's Day True History in 1930. So you mean to tell me around the time when they said no black people could read in the United States, but in 1930s, you mean to tell me Moors had, in 1920s, Moorish Jews had Israelite Hebrew schools? You understand? It's like, which one is it, man? It seems like every other day we just finding out shit that we already had popping. Somehow or another, nobody telling us about it. Everybody's still telling us about what we don't have here. But if we was to try to go over there to do anything, it'd be worse. Anybody else? The Mauritanian families descended from the Andalusian Muslims, right? Moors, Musulmans. We find that the names Perez, Santiago, Valenciano, Aragon, etc., names which have sometimes led European authors into error and made them fancy they saw apostates from Christianity amongst the descendants of the martyrs of Islamism. That the robbers who traded was to carry men away and sell them as slaves needed no legal compulsion to change the names of their slaves. See? The precaution which they naturally took in this matter baffled the researches of the disconsolate parents, who could only endeavor to recover their lost children by a description for which was always imperfect and always uncertain. In the modern times, the same system has been adopted, although it has not been dictated by equally prudential motives. The laws of the Christian Europe have even in our own times legalized the sale of slaves. And soon as the Negro had landed in the colonies, it was usually for the purchaser to give him a new name. See? So all the original enslaved ones were Moors, who had their names adopted by those who stole them so that way they could keep the land in trust for them. Right? But then listen to this. The decree issued in 1609 fully that 3,500,000 Moors or Moriscos, as they are descendant of from 1592 to 1610, over 1,000,000 Moriscos made their way into France, and where they had become known as the Huguenots. It is in France where many of the latest descendants of the Almoravid dynasties had been settled. It was long ago that these Almoorish ancestors made those shores their homes. For there was a distinct French Huguenot lineage of George Washington, and it came to him from his first American ancestor, Nicholas Maritou, a Huguenot refugee who came to Virginia in 1620, and that there is no confusion of the Huguenot blood into the Washington family, which I spoke about again on our joint, The Occult History of George Washington. It was in a natural event, which was the New Madrid earthquake situation, and it was also the destruction of what they wrought during the event. Should have used the event as a means to make everything crazy, even worse, which then made us, I guess, have to fight the battle on two fronts, which made it harder to stay unified in the center. Not to mention there was so many dirty ones of us that was low-key helping them. So we speak of the old Dutch Empire. That's an old American empire, comprised of native-born Moors here and people from what they call the Netherlands, who were themselves also Moors, who were following the old Egyptian way. See? Just tied them into the Canaanite thing like that. Anybody else? So yeah, so some cities were bombed, and all of that, but there was also the upheaval and the destruction, and then from the destruction, everything that happened from there. These Moors were conscious of all of this, and they were part. And these were our grandfathers and great grandmothers and them, from both sides, you know. The New Madrid earthquake happened in 1812, at the same time that the so-called War of 1812 happened. But they only talked to us about the War of 1812. They never talked to us about the other shit, do they? There's no stories, there's no historical, there's no social studies on the New Madrid earthquake, none of that. You got to be into archaeology and geology to know about that. So as you can see, Negro Indians in rebellion, see, Moors, territory in the Chickasaw Nation, a band tied up the postmaster and his wife. You see, this is when we were starting to get up and start to kick them out of everything. See, the Almohad Caliphate was the Moroccan Berber Muslim movement of the empire founded in the 12th century. The Almohad movement was founded by Ibn Turnat among the Berber Masmuda tribes of the southern Morocco around 1120, which was I can't even do the math right now. The Almohads first established a Berber state, right, in Ternil at the Atlas Mountains, right? So this is what the Alamo was based on because it goes further down into the ground. It's huge. But the Almohad, the Almoravid, this again was Toussaint L'Ouverture, one of the most famous paintings of him with his cherry red fez on. So you know what that is. Anybody else? But yeah, with this report right here, the Negro Indians in Rebellion. It basically gets into that we started going into all of these areas and shutting down all of the European post offices, trying to put everything back under the national jurisdiction, which then led to the war. Anybody else? I still ain't even get through half of these things. Crazy. Okay. Yeah, so you read the story of Yaqub, right? And you read the whole Making of the White Man by Paul Lawrence Guthrie and all of that. If you look at the sites, they all correspond with where the so-called transatlantic slave trade sites was at. Like one for one. Maor or Maor, right? Or mortar, which means luminous body or light, like I said. So how can it mean black, but it mean light? When they say more mean black, what they're saying is that they saying more means melanin. So they're associating the word black with melanin. So if they saying more means melanin, that's different. But when they say more means black, what they talking about is the negative criminal status of the black skin color. So in that instance, in that essence, it's incorrect. It doesn't. Because more can be associated with that. Known as the Bornstone inscribed, the rock reads, "The proclamation of the annexation, do not deface. By this Hanno takes possession." Hanno in question may have been the famous Phoenician explorer, also known as Hanno Bey, who wrote Pericles, and he was, and is. So that's proof that, again, as ancient Moors, this is why the ancient so-called Tsaliges or Cherokees was speaking Berber Latin, because all of that is part of the same thing, which is expounded upon in that book I was telling you about, Samuel Pope. This time we'll get into the dates, specifically from the Time Walker book. It gets into the specific dates of when things was kind of turned over. Because all of these are depictions of different Moors from different parts of the kingdom, of the empire. But as you see, the consistency in the dress is basically always the same, which shows that there was a consistency in the way that the Moors from America specifically dressed and carried themselves at court, etc. Anybody else? Exactly. So, like I said, in 1920, blacks, so-called blacks, or Ethiopians, or whatever you want to call them, had their own synagogues and temples and all that type of shit. Everything these Jews out here got, it was most likely theirs first, and then the Ashkenazims, who were basically Frankists, the Frankist Jews came in and then shut that down, took it over with the help of the Italian mob, and that's how they got their stripes to be white. Because that's what the books say. Yeah, they were all around the time that the Prophet Ali came and then made everybody, tied everybody back to the land by claiming that we was already here, which then shut down the Kingdom of Morocco and what they was doing because that wasn't even established yet. Kingdom of Morocco was still a French protectorate, so that didn't exist. So the only Morocco that existed was those Moors that were still tying themselves to the Orient. That's why the Orient, or the secret of the Orient, was always kept secret from the traditional masses and made us believe it was about being of the Far East. But the Far East in the Freemasonic story or connection really just another way of saying the extreme West. Because the farthest east you go, you wind up west, right? And the Maghreb al-Aqsa is the land of the farthest west, the extreme west, which is where we at. Which is why he had to be listed as Negroes and everything else, to be put on chain gangs and all this other shit, where they criminalized being so-called black, and then based it on the skin color, and they used the caste thing to tie the caste to the color when it was really about the caste and the system itself, regards to what color you went in. Because black mean pale. Anybody else? Yeah, there's a book on the Irish of Jamaica. You can get that book. Talks all about that. How the Jamaican and the Irish share the green, why the green is so important. It's just like this picture, everything they had, they built on top of what we was already doing. So on your left, this is a silver certificate. That's what the money used to look like. That money is based on the pyramid that this mosque on the left is built on the right is built on. And all of that was hidden through the war between the northern and the southern jurisdictions, so-called Freemasonic wars between the north and the south jurisdiction, not the north and the south geographic location. Anybody else? Good looking. I appreciate it. Yes, indeed. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for coming through once again. I appreciate it. If you can go to www.cashapp.com and go to money sign capital DS418.com if you haven't already. Please send that $30. I appreciate it. As well, if you want to do it through PayPal, you can do so at www.dukeoftears@gmail.com. It's the PayPal joint. Send it there. You want to link me, these are the links that I have up. You can get to me like that, or you can hit me up at email through houseofl@hotmail.com. That's HOUSOFEL@hotmail.com. Also, if you haven't, definitely check out www.cordovaorganics.com, as well as the ADOT app. You can get it directly and become a subscriber. You spread the word. You can do so at the Google Play or the Apple Play Store. It's definitely up there now. Check that out. All of the members, I appreciate you. You know, if you haven't, already, you can definitely go to the website www.aseerthediggiteers.com, and also check out the darkscroll418.com. It's up. I'm diligently working on the next joint, the companion that'll go with this. The website will be up soon. That'll have everything pertaining to that. Islam, thank you, Nuclear Vision. Nuclear Vision said I'm in Egypt right now, so if anything you need, let me know. Islam, definitely hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. Definitely love to get fez or something from out there. See what their fezzes is like. That would be awesome. Anybody else have any questions? Not. Definitely appreciate you. Again, big up to everybody that came out together on the Masters, everybody that I spoke to. Inshallah, I'll be able to speak to you soon. And yeah, man, let's keep it moving. Let's look to us being positive, regardless of what they say is negative. You know what it is. Definitely hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com, whatever. And if you have any questions about anything, individual processes, whatever, hit me up, houseofl@hotmail.com. All right. So again, long live the empire, long live the Moors. Anything else, please hit me up. Please send that if you haven't, because it all helps keep the operation going. Big up to Sustain Brandon.